Good day, Little River Band fans and friends. And thanks for joining us today for our Coda on episode number 4, titled Move On. This is the period of time that we're exploring that relates to 1978 through about 1981, is my recollection. And with that, let's see if we can get some recollections from our good friend and our feature, Mr. Wayne Nelson, celebrating his 40th anniversary with Little River Band this year. Wayne, what's going on?
We are.
We're on.
We are on. And you're getting really good with these transitional things. Speaking of recollections, let's get some. You got a future. You got a future here.
I'm glad to know that beyond my voice, I'm also developing the right rhythm for these things. How'd you like that one? I caught that one too.
I did. You know what? See what I'm saying?
Listen, before we begin, I can tell you have one of your message shirts on today. Do you want to help the fans understand what you're advocating today?
I will. Look at this. There we go.
There we go.
Water changes everything, which is fundamentally a truism, but it's all about clean water. And in my humble opinion, clean water could change the world in places where there aren't any. Well, you know, even in America, do you know that? I think it's an astounding percentage. It's over half. I think it's upwards of 70%, 75% of Native American homes do not have running water.
Do not have running water. Whoa.
No, they have to go and collect water from and it's not tribal where they're walking and as in Africa, walking a couple of miles to the local creek or whatever, but you go to a local source, but they don't have running water in their homes. That's, what year is it? I mean, it's 2020 in the wealthiest nation in the world, and our Native American citizens most of them don't have running water. It's appalling.
This doesn't fit for today's episode, but as I recall, Little River Band in recent years did something about this, as a matter of fact.
We did, and we'll bring it up later, but there was a song called Clean the Water, and we were going to pair with a famous artist who is known for his marine figures and whatever, and he was starting a foundation that none of it gelled to go to where we thought it would, but we did get active in it, and I've learned some other avenues that someday, somehow, we're going to help them out again. Once we get past this stall in our career, we can move on with using some of our funds to help these different efforts around the world.
Well, the climate change believer that you are, I can understand why you'd be advocating for that. But let's not get sidetracked. Let's put ourselves right back into this window of time for Coda number 4. And as I pull up the slide deck, you might just want to remind the viewers about why you titled this episode Move On.
This was essentially the steps that led up to being in Little River Band and recording the song that certainly was a game changer for me, but was also a continuation of Little River Band's recording success and career, which was Night Owls. But the move on part was, it came to a fork in the road, and you had to decide whether we move on or we go back. And I'll explain that as we step through the slides and see where that all fell. As a matter of fact, in this period, it came up crucially twice. I just about didn't move on.
2 different pivot points. So let's talk about what helped to catalyze the moving on. We're back to our old friend Don Marquise. What role did Don have associated with this?
Well, the first move on, which was a decision, but it was kind of a duh. If the door opened like it did, the first part of it is, okay, go through the door. Don had left Chicago. This is early 1978. He had left Chicago, gone to Los Angeles to take his talents out there and see if he could do more with them than what was going on in Chicago. And he did. He was very well connected. Got well connected. But one of the gigs that he found out about and stepped into was working for a smooth jazz singer. And so the smooth jazz singer, there was a bass player. This is a funny story. When we get to her, I'll describe it. But so there we are again, reuniting in, let's see, what year was I turned 60? So it would have had to have been 2010.
2010.
Yeah. And we all got to play together again. But great night. I'm sure that will come up again in our codas.
It will, as a matter of fact. But Don called you out to actually go to work with this young lady.
Yes, this is Eloise Laws. She's the younger sister of Hubert Laws, the famous jazz flautist, and Ronnie Laws, the kind of R&B jazz, smooth jazz saxophone player. And Eloise was finding her own course as a female jazz singer, and she was very good. She was very low. It wasn't a high energy jazz thing. It was very smooth, uh, very grown up, very elegant. I would call it. She was very good. So this was the job. Now, this is funny because everything I just described in this picture of her, you wouldn't expect this person to be doing what he was doing. But the bass player at the time had been or was still the trombone player for Earth, Wind, and Fire. He was in the Phoenix Horns. And I think his name was Ron Satterfield, if I remember. I believe he was a Satterfield. But he was also a bass player, and he was an outrageous bass player. And a couple of days into rehearsal, he just steps up to the front and starts playing his bass with his teeth.
Is this something that you've added to your repertoire as a
I have not, and I I didn't even know it was possible. I didn't know you could get your teeth around a bass string. Or he was pretending to play with his teeth and plucking. I don't know what he was doing. Whatever it was a little too far, a little too adventurous for Eloise and her
too far afield?
Yeah.
Well,
And
Eloise continued on with a career. I mean, we got another shot of her here from a little bit later on.
he did indeed, and good honor, good honor.
This lineup that you performed with, that Don got you to, Don was obviously playing in the band, but
Right.
you expanded your musical horizons pretty significantly here with the other folks you started to play with. You tell us a little bit about this gentleman?
Yes, this is Andre Fisher. Andre Fisher, if we dial the machine back a little bit, remember the story of Rufus leaving, or sorry, Ask Rufus deciding to leave Chicago. The singer and the drummer stayed behind, and Don and I worked with them. That was Paulette McWilliams and Lee Graziano. Um, the band that went to Los Angeles, Andre Fisher became the drummer for Rufus with Chaka Khan and the other band members from Chicago that had left, or from Illinois actually. The bass player came from a band called the One-Eyed Jacks down in Champaign, Dennis Belfield.
Yep.
And
A fraternity band, actually. They were all SAEs down at the University of Illinois.
were they really? I didn't know that.
Yes, they were. Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. Well, Dennis was great bass player. We went to see the One-Eyed Jacks a couple times.
We did.
Great players. Anyway, and Al Siner went with. Keyboard player Kevin Murphy went with. They picked up another keyboard player, and Andre became the drummer. Now, Andre is the son of Claire Fisher, who was well known for his orchestrations and his instructional booklets and so on and so forth. He's a very famous Los Angeles orchestral arranger and conductor. Andre was the son of Claire, and so he had this incredible musical background behind him, but was also funky as it gets. And so, tell me something good. That's Andre.
That's Andre.
And that groove is, carved in stone. That groove wasn't going anywhere. So I was about to pair up with that caliber of drummer to play smooth jazz with Don, Andre, and the other band members.
So something else, and this is another photo that you found in your archive that you sent along. I immediately knew who was in this photo other than Andre, but I didn't know the other part of the story that relates to Miss Natalie Cole, who's here on the left.
Yeah, Andre and Natalie. Now, you know who these guys are?
I do.
Well, fill me in because I don't, and I'm sure I will as soon as you say their names. But I don't know their names. But what I can tell you is that when I met, they he was still married to Natalie. The marriage didn't last, and I'm not sure what the timeline was. But at the time that we met up, he was married to Natalie, and she was just at that verge of exploding as an artist. Um, but again, I don't know the backstory any further than that. I just know that was the drummer. So who are the other gentlemen?
So truth be told, I really don't know who they are, but I did know who she was immediately upon seeing the photo. I just didn't know that the two of them had been married. But you told me a story about Andre that related to one of our themes for the overall Kangaroo Court series. And that's that Andre really helped you to feel that you belonged. I think one of the questions I asked you as you thought about each and every one of these new musical tiers you were moving to, whether or not you felt like you belonged in that tier. And you said that Andre really helped to convince you that you did belong. Do you remember the story about that?
Well, I do. It was so the other people in the band were well known in LA. This was a collection of A players, and we were even rehearsing at the studios in the building that War worked out of. So coming through at any given moment were players and people and stuff that were poking their head in and to see what was going on with Eloise and they're all the A players and whatever they were stopping in to do a session with War or move on and so on and so forth and right on Sunset Boulevard and I show up again to LA. I had never been west of the Mississippi. So, well, except for when we traveled in Iowa. I take that back. Yeah. But as a grown, I've certainly never been to the West Coast. So this was just a monumental keep it together kind of moment. And I'm there with my Gibson grabber bass. No one, everybody's like, "What is that?" I said, "What's it? This pickup slide and whatever." And everybody's, "Oh, that's nice to me."
Where's
Good
this
luck
guy
with
from?
that. And Don had recommended that I could do the gig. I had played this record with Paulette, and the music was similar. Really interesting to go back and listen to it now. It was all in that similar female Quincy Jones, smooth, mellow R&B kind of situation. And I had played on that record and whatever. And I came out and here's Andre Fisher, and I come in green as a hick from Central Illinois with the Gibson grabber bass. And it was kind of, well, plug it in. Let's go. Let's see what it'll do. And
Light it up.
we just played a little bit. He knew I was you can't put it any other way. Nervous to fulfill the role. The first day was an audition, without a doubt. It's Los Angeles. There are bass players washing cars that were every bit as qualified, but Don said this is going to work. Couple of harmonies with Andre and Eloise, and a couple of grooves, and everything just kind of settled right in. And they said, "Boom, new song." And I was like, "Whoa, okay, bear with me here. I'll get there, but I'm a little slow on the reading thing." Andre said, "Dude, don't worry about it. You're here. You're good."
Hmm.
And that was just like deep breath, settle down, find the kick drum and stay on it. You know what I mean? It was one of those things. But his cool after knowing his track record. And by the way, the whole thing with Paulette and Leo, he knew Leo, he knew of Leo, and so on and so forth. So it just settled in, and he was just the best at, hang in there, we're good.
Yeah. So, in teaching, we talk about the sort of defining moments that teachers can have with students all the time. And what he said to you, what Andre said to you in that moment was kind of a defining moment for you. And it's something that really good teachers do a lot of and have the opportunity to help to propel young people on to doing other things because of the confidence that something like that brings. And that's obviously what happened. But you played with a whole bunch of, as you said, other A players. Let's introduce some of these folks too. Here's Pat Kelly.
Pat Kelly is, was and is well-known LA guitarist with his own career, his own CD, his own stuff. Much later, we went on to do other things, but the Eloise gig was the first that I had met him. We actually did one of his songs, and don't go away from this picture. We actually did one of his songs in the set too as a warm-up before Eloise came out. So
Ah,
he was great player. Studied in the Rittenhour and Larry Carlton school, so he
mhm.
could he could flow and he could funk as well. He was very good. Again, as a rhythm section, um, to just sit there, just do your job. You know what I mean? Don't overdo it. Don't overthink. Do your gig. And Pat was really good. Pat
Well,
became a good buddy. Became a good
like,
buddy.
like with Eloise, I found another photo of Pat from years later.
Yes, and apparently his love of Chuck's has wore off on me. I'm right there with him.
The early Chuck Taylors, as is.
Yes, yes.
We have another catch here, though, too. And actually, I want to make a connection to this one that we hadn't talked about.
Hmm.
I think the first time I saw Tennyson Stevens, who's pictured here, was actually playing with Phil Upchurch, the
Yes,
Chicago version of George Benson as a guitarist.
right.
And I was like, who is that dude? He just wailed and wailed and wailed. So tell us about Tennyson, who played keyboards with Eloise.
Tennyson was amazing in this moment of his career. You would put him on the same level vocally and piano playing wise as, yeah, that guy.
It was the Donny Hathaway.
Donny Hathaway, thank you.
Yeah.
And it was striking how much they were mirror images. Um, uh, and he was just the nicest man I could have ever imagined stepping in with. Andre was the you and I gotta you and I gotta lock in, but the rest of the guys were all just so accepting of this brand new person that had walked in to take the gig after somebody as uh, with headlines like Satterfield, was told you're not the right guy. So it was, and the first gig was 6 days away, so it was one of those get in there and do it. But they were so accommodating and welcoming and warm, and it turned into very quickly a very good band that it was just as much fun to play with no vocals at all and play the grooves as it was when Eloise came out and there was some vocals and some femininity added to the bunch.
Yeah. Well, Tennyson, not unlike the other players, of course, was a recording artist as well. And
Right.
this is one that I grabbed. I'm not even sure I can actually read the title of this. This came off
Is
of Google Images.
is that Phil?
I think that is Phil, and that's actually Tennyson behind him.
I believe it is, and I've got a great story about Phil Upchurch. He knew Paulette, he knew Leo. It was a Chicago thing. He had moved out there and transplanted as well, and Phil was, I mean, he was cutting records with people in L.A. He was making it, and the Chicago people that all migrated out there, we all got into this Sunday afternoon 16-inch softball group.
That's so Chicago.
It's so Chicago. You remember this. Now, to people that don't know, okay, you got a baseball, then you got a softball, and then you got a 16-inch softball. And the 16-inch softball, you can't wear a glove, nothing will hold it. It's all just hands. And this ball is like at the beginning of the game, it's like a rock coming at you. It's ridiculous. And we kept asking Phil to come and play. And he said, no, my hands, man, my hands, I can't do it. And we're like, no, you just catch the ball like this. You don't put your finger, you gotta No, man, my hands, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it.
Lloyd's of London. Yeah.
Yeah, he finally came out. He finally came out, and Phil was of a slight demeanor, so we stuck him at shortstop. 5 minutes into the game, a hot shot went to shortstop, and he went to try to grab the ball like this, broke his finger, broke his left little finger, his fingering on the fretboard's hand, and swore at us all the way to the car and all the way out the parking lot. You bastards! He was out for 2 months.
Yes. Well, Phil knew what he was doing by saying, "I'm not coming out. I'm not coming out."
And that story just came to me as like a beacon when I saw his name there. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, we could talk about the other first baseman who had good hands that we recruited to the fraternity because we needed a good first baseman for 16-inch softball.
And who was that?
That was Whale, as I recall. That was
Oh, you couldn't throw the ball past him. He was everywhere. If it
he's
didn't
also
hit
a
him in the
card
hands,
sharp,
it hit
as I
him here.
recall too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so in episode 4, you actually describe what happened with Eloise Laws, because the truth in story here is, to cut to the chase, is it crashed and burned in a very short period of time.
It did. So we've got 1 week of rehearsal with Eloise and this band. Like I say, it was coming together, and it was getting comfortable as a first venture in LA. And our first gigs were in New Orleans at Tipitino's, famous lounge, dinner, music, famous venue. I think we had 2 nights there. We had a Friday, Saturday, and then there was going to be a 7-week tour to major cities that kicked off with New Orleans. First night was great, and second night was even better. We were getting solid now as performing in front of these people. And Sunday morning, they had booked us in a very nice hotel downtown, Intercontinental or something like that. Note under the door Sunday morning: tour canceled. Good luck.
That's a heck of a thing to wake up to on a Sunday morning.
And I mean, it was too. Oh, by the way, the tour manager was the drummer for the band that had Green Eyed Lady, Sugarloaf. This was LA. The tour manager was part of a band that had a huge hit song that
Yeah.
we loved. Green Eyed Ladies, little lady.
The terrific keyboard
Fantastic
solo,
song.
that B3 solo.
Yeah, and he was his name was Jerry, I believe. There were 3 Jerrys in that band. Jerry Corbetta was one of them. Jerry somebody else was the keyboard player, and this guy was Jerry the drummer. Jerry, tour canceled. Good luck.
So what did you do? Just remind us real quickly, because there's another move on in this one, right?
Well, Don and I, we made our way back. We were able to change our flight that was going to be back to LA or wherever it was going. We changed it to a flight to Chicago. Don and I went there, and on the way, we just immediately kind of decided we should get back to LA as soon as we can. Stuff happens. Well, we didn't even know whether we were going to get paid, and so, but that question was a family decision, because there was a second child on the way, and so on and so forth. And the decision was, you've already gotten out there. We've already done this. This one fell through. Go back, try again. And so move on was, now Don and I got in a car and we drove full on straight back 24 some hours to get to LA and start over.
Right. So both kind of peer support as colleagues, you and Don, and then certainly family support in relation to your wife saying, you made a run at this, let's keep going, see what happens.
No question.
You go back out and you end up linking up once again with your old friend, Paulette McWilliams.
Yes. This is the album that I worked on, Never Been Here Before. Paulette, it had been heard by Quincy. It had been heard by some people, and Paulette was developing her own identity in LA. She lived in Santa Monica. She had a very nice 2-bedroom apartment, and somehow on the way out there, it became known that I was going to be looking for a place to live, and she said, come here, help me with the rent, et cetera, et cetera. So I was living there with her. but with no job. I mean, we had no work.
Yep. So we're really talking lean times now.
Very. So this is the summer of 78, and this is, I believe, July, just into the heat of the California summer. And so I move in there, and then it's like, where's the work going to come from? We had no idea.
So I tried to capture where you told me the work went in this series of slides.
You
Which,
did you did really well. I don't know how I would have ever found
which I
anything.
think you can tell a story about now for our listeners, because
Yes.
this is about the real paying your dues as a musician.
This became my first gig after Eloise Law's band. The whole tour fell apart. Those frames attached to the front of the shopping carts have little buttons on the side, and they get trashed in the parking lots because it's so hot. People are slamming the carts together. The frames break. The ads fall out. So this was a little cottage industry of you go somewhere to a small little factory. They hand you the frame parts, an ice pick, and the ads of the week, and you go to the prescribed parking lots in LA in the summer, in the heat, and you take the ice pick and you stick it in the side of the frame, and you take out the parts that are broken and you put the frame back together with new parts with a new ad in it, and you do this to 400 shopping carts in the parking lot in 105 degrees with an ice pick. The news of that job came through Sandy somehow. Sandy knew, and Sandy had driven the number 7 Bigsby Street truck out to LA.
LA.
So we were using the truck again, not to be musicians, but to put ice picks in our in the in. I've still got 3 scars from,
Still have dents from those.
yeah, where the frame collapsed and your hands on the other side of it, and we stuck with that for about 5 or 6 days, and we finally, now the ice picks are getting worn and whatever, and they're rusty, and what are we doing? We are potentially ruining our careers.
Well, back to Fill Up Church and talking about hands. You got
Yeah.
a keyboard player in Sandy Mazzolo and a bass player in Wayne Nelson, and you guys are poking yourself with ice picks. Not such a good idea.
Now somehow Jeff King finds out that we're there. And Jeff King went through the proper channels. Sandy and I were just winging it. And Jeff King decided to go to the Musicians Union because he had been a member in good standing in Chicago, which of course we were not. And so he transferred his membership from the Chicago Musicians Union to the LA Musicians Union. He could read anything that was written. He was a percussionist, a guitar player, a keyboard player, and a songwriter. It was the right move for him. He should have been there, taking the demo that we worked with, so on and so forth. He was in the right spot. He somehow found a connection that heard about a job being one of the bands that played at Magic Mountain. And he called me and said, "Do we know anybody else?" I said, "Well, Sandy and I are here. You can play guitar if you had to, but drums, keyboards, and bass, we can be one of those bands that plays 2 sets in the little, the little structure, the little hut in the middle of Magic Mountain. And between us, we must have enough songs that we could play 2 45-minute sets." And so we threw a band together, and Sandy, Jeff, and I went to play at Magic Mountain, Six Flags out in, starts with a V. I can't remember the name of the town. Anyway, north of Los Angeles. We lasted 3 days before somebody from the park came through and heard us playing and went, "Not the right material, gents."
Not
We
quite
were,
fit, eh, for Magic Mountain?
yeah, not quite family-oriented material you're doing there. What, we're doing one of Jeff's songs and one of Sandy's songs, and we're doing some Steely Dan and they just said, "No, this isn't working." So that didn't last very long. We came back to, this was a commute. It was a 1-hour thing to get out to Six Flags. And the next thing, Jeff calls me a couple weeks later. We're trying to regroup, nothing happening. And Jeff calls and says, I was just at the Musicians Union today and I looked on the board and there was a card, business card from Jim Messina, and a note saying he was looking for a percussionist and a bass player. Hopefully that's sing. He said, what do you think? I said, well, let's call. I mean, I was a Messina, Loggins and Messina fan, big fan, as a matter of fact. Knew that music. I don't know that Jeff knew it as well as I did, but it turns out that we both called independently, and Messina was furious. He answered my call. I don't know if he answered Jeff's. Yeah, he did, because Jeff went up and auditioned too, but he answered my call and he said, I guess I was first. He said, where did you get this number? And I said, wow, I'm sorry, but a friend of mine went to the Musicians Union. He said, the Musicians Union? I wouldn't look for musicians at the Musicians Union.
That sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but nonetheless.
It was very strange. And so I said, I'm sorry that this turned out like this, but I hear you're looking for a bass player, and I'm a fan, and I'm close, and I would, if you are still going to be doing auditions, would you please take my number and call me back if you, if the opportunity arises again, whatever. But I sing and play and would love to come up and check it out. And he said, you know what? Maybe this is meant to be. So what are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, I hope I'm coming to Santa Barbara, to audition for you. He said, let's do it. Come on up. We'll meet late morning. We'll have some lunch and maybe play some music, and we'll take it from there. So.
And as I recall about the audition, it was just the two of you, right?
Just the two of us.
You weren't auditioning with the band.
No, and the band was pretty much assembled. As a matter of fact, I think it was all assembled. The keyboard player was not quite sure if he was going to stay, but the band was already in place. It was a Santa Barbara band called Sunshower. Now, Sunshower had worked with different bass players, but they were willing and ready to embrace whoever came up to work with Messina and make it a band and move forward. I think that bass player was going to go back to Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken, and that was coming up in the fall. So the chair was open.
So here's the sun shower photo that we have from the archives.
And there they are. So clockwise, I'm lower left. Above me is the drummer named Tony Moreno. Hispanic, grown up all his life. His father was a percussionist. He was a percussionist and drummer. Sang a little bit, not very much, but he was primarily going to be the drums and percussion for the band. Not his role wasn't going to be vocals. To the next of him is the keyboard player. His first name's Dominic, and I can't remember his last name. It was an Italianish name. He lived not far away in a town called Summerland. Dominic, I apologize. It's been a long time. In front of Dominic on the far right there is Jeff Elliott, who was a trumpet and flugelhorn player. And then in the center of the bottom row is Craig Thomas. Craig Thomas was the sax player, songwriter, and lead singer for Sunshower. And between myself, Craig, and Jimmy, we were handling most of the vocals as we moved on with rehearsing with Jimmy. But that was the band that the bass chair was going to open up because the guy was going to go back to Boston and go to school. I remember now. So the timing was just kind of perfect to have heard the call or heard from Jeff King to go up and get the job with not only Messina but with this band as well. So it was
he was really hiring Sunshower as his band.
He was indeed. Those four guys had the job. Dominic was a great player, but he was very quote unquote out. Dominic loved to go out and was very good at it. And I don't just mean jazz, but I mean in a very modern way. He didn't like boundaries, and Jimmy was all about this is the way it is, and we're going to rehearse it until you guys know it in your sleep, because someday you'll have to. I'll tell that story in a minute, but
Yeah, we'll talk a
it was a
little bit more
lesson
just about how,
lesson in life to work with Jimmy. But anyway,
how much.
Dominic ended up leaving, and my good friend Jim Studer came. I didn't know him at the time, but we became best friends. He took Dominic's place eventually.
Yeah. So we've got one other photo here that I just want to make sure that we mark in 1979, Mr. Wayne Nelson. I was going to give you a hard time about the difference here between the cowboy shirts that you're sporting at this time.
You're not going to give me a hard time about the length of the collar because I gave it to you about yours.
Mine was probably 3 inches longer than that one. Are you kidding?
Well, I'm gonna just notice one other thing. I actually had sideburns. I don't know how I pulled that off, but there was facial hair. It's not
I'm not
around
sure
anymore.
those are actually sideburns or your hair was just growing that far down. That's what
Could
did it instead.
it could have been could have
You
been
have one more though from this era, which actually has you on stage. And I think when I showed you this
with
picture, you actually
without sideburns, by the way. So there you
without
go.
sideburns, yes. But you made a specific reference to this photo when I showed this one to you.
I did. That was okay. Notice the grabber bass is gone. We've graduated back to Fenders, the 65 Fender jazz bass is a beauty. No, 68. Loved it. But the reason for being back to Fender basses was all based around Jaco Pastorius, and I have a great picture of him. I got to slip in a picture of Jaco here as I speak. It might be right next to me.
Wow. Now
And you'll
that's a
see,
fan.
as a matter of fact, you will see exactly why I said what I said. No, it's not. He's sitting down. Um, there's the man. Oh, that's
And he has comedy with this at the same time.
that was the backing to the picture. Wow, who's that? Jaco Pastorius.
There we go.
He was the man.
Famous.
Famous bass player. Anyway, that was I'd gone back to the Fender jazz bass because that was the Jaco bass, and I referred to that as my Jaco look, bent over just a little bit, looking forward, playing, intensely playing the jazz bass. Yeah, and he wanted to remove the picture. I said, no, that's my Jaco look, man.
Well, we managed to capture it in there, but you know what else we were able to capture is
You know what? I just want to say, as far as Jaco is concerned, that's about as close as I got to being able to play like him.
Being a
Was just
Jaco?
standing there. Yeah, that was it. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
not exactly weather report caliber. Is that what you're saying? But no, we're going to hear some things in the next few minutes, and that's where I'm going.
You're not going to hear anything like Jaco, I can tell you that.
But
Go
the
ahead.
nice thing about this period of time is we've actually got some audio recordings of the work that you were involved in doing.
Yes, we
fact,
do.
Sunshower went into the studio and was recording. Tell us about what was happening with Sunshower, where the music was coming from, and then we're going to play a little recording here in just a minute.
Right. So Sunshower was a band unto itself, and the master plan was that we would work together with Jim to do his first solo record. Everybody lived there in Santa Barbara. I eventually moved there a few months later with family in tow. The secondary part was that as we were working on our material, Jim was going to then produce our record. Once the Oasis record had run its course, we would then be ready to go into the studio, and it would be a 1-2 thing. And then he would be ready with his next set of material a year later. We were going to stagger it like that and try to get Sunshower off the mark as a brand new band.
So we're going to spin a little bit, an excerpt from Ask Me How I Feel, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it afterwards. I'll let you make the choice about sort of where you want to fade and where you want to come in. But this is Sunshower recording, and this is in 1979, if I've got this marked correctly.
Yes, it is. And I'll tell the joke now so we can move on. Ask Me How I Fell. Due to recent episodes, I can tell you that it was vertigo. Nevertheless,
right up to date to 20 to 20. It was Vertigo.
you know
Yeah,
what? We might as well be current, don't you think?
absolutely.
All right, here comes Ask Me How I Feel.
Excellent.
The reason I wanted you to hear the guitar thing is because, again, people knew people, and it was just crazy what was going on at that point. Having gone to LA in 78, now in 79, that was Lee Ritenour playing the guitar solo.
Wow.
And he, you know, I'm Ritenour walks in with his guitar and he wants to know, well, what's the song? What's the, you know, we got to walk him through this thing. Um, at the end of this, at the end of the solo, at the end of the song, sorry, we start doing this twirling thing of the chords just stepping up, going through this progression and whatever, and he's soloing over this progression of chords that just keeps moving up in whole steps, and he never missed a note. That was one take of
One
written.
day.
Yeah, he heard it, played through, and said go, and just that's the caliber of people. The guy with the cowbell I was pointing out,
Yeah.
Lenny Castro, the percussionist from Toto,
Oh, yeah.
and countless other bands. Great, it just showed up with his stuff and set it up, and we're just jamming and having a great time. And the drummer had been in a band called Pages, with Richard Page, which became Mr. Mister. George Lawrence was on the record just before, and he decided, I don't want to be in LA anymore, and he moved to Santa Barbara and came up to work with us. So it was just an amazing thing. We didn't have a lead guitar player, so Ritenour played on a track. Al Siner from Rufus played on a track.
Hmm.
About 3 or 4 other LA session players played on our demo, and we would have picked a player when it was time, you know, that kind of thing. But anyway, that was the essence of that band. As a matter of fact, that's George back there behind us. That's not Tony, that's George. That's the recording version of Sun Shower.
Sun Shower. Okay.
Brings back great memories, I will say that. And so I won't give it away yet, but of course there was a move on moment that was very difficult based on the love for our original material.
Yeah. So all this Sun Shower stuff's going on, and Messina's writing as well. You've
Yep.
already described the kind of idea that we're going to do Messina's work, we're going to record Sun Shower, we're going to come back to Messina, kind of the back and forth. I think you referred to it one time in a conversation we had as being kind of the band model, if you would.
Right.
And that Messina was going to help to take the lead with that, which that was the actual audition that you went up to when you first started this segment that led to your recording with Jimmy on the album Oasis.
Right. And you made mention of the fact that when I went up to meet Jimmy, it was as much about personal interaction. He wanted to know that he wanted to know that he could sit down with his players, look them in the eye, and talk about whatever, not have it be tense or how much am I going to make? What am I going to do? What are my hours? You know, it was like, do you want to be here or not, kind of thing.
Yeah. Really built on fit.
Huh?
It really built around fit.
It was as much about fit as it was talent. If the fit was good and the playing didn't jive or the voices didn't jive. But anyway, so we talked, and then he pulled out a guitar. He pulled out one of his basses, said, what would you do under this song? It was a ballad. And I said, I'd stay out of your way, and played that. Sing a harmony with me. He's playing, and we sang. he said, I'm going to call you back tomorrow, but this felt really good.
Hmm.
And so I left Santa Barbara going, yeah, there's another one of those. I'll call you back tomorrow. And he called back the next day. As a matter of fact, he didn't wait. He called back that night. He called back that night to Paulette's apartment. It's the only phone I had, no cell phones then, you know, and said, here's the rough schedule. This is what's going to happen. And you got to work it out with Sunshower and so on and so forth, what they're going to do, but you're in. And we'll start rehearsing in earnest, like beginning of September.
And the rehearsing part actually leads you here. Here is now the band
There
that
you go.
recorded Oasis with Jimmy there in the front row.
That's actually not it. Yeah, Jimmy Messina. Directly behind him is Jim Studer. There,
Right?
there were two Jimmys, but that's myself, Studer, Craig, and uh, Jeff in the back. We had been assigned the task of going to get Hawaiian shirts.
Hawaiian shirts. There we go.
We were headed for Hawaii, and Tony said, "I don't wear Hawaiian shirts." so, but that was the band. Yeah, it was. So that was the Sunshower that recorded with Messina, and that happened in spring of '79, spring to summer of '79, and we dove in for Jimmy's stuff. Then when that tour was over with is when we recorded our material. So what you're going to play now actually happened before Ask Me How I Feel, but by that time we were burning. I mean, we had spent all this time with Jimmy working out his stuff. As you'll hear, it's intricate. We were ready to go and make ours because we knew where everybody sat in that kind of situation.
Yeah. Talk just a little bit from a musical point of view about what the new demands were on you in relation to the kind of music that Messina was producing at that time.
Well, he was stepping into new territory. He had always been known for his very characteristic finger picking lead Tex-Mex, you know, that Loggins of Messina stuff from Your Mama Don't Dance and so on and so forth. He didn't use a pick, rarely used a pick. It was all finger picking electric guitar. Really interesting technique to stay with. You know what I mean? Everybody's all about pick and hammering and so on and so forth. Jimmy was very almost flamenco-ish with his finger picking. Um, that had to take center stage always in the track, in the rhythm, et cetera, et cetera. There wasn't another guitar player. It was Jimmy, keyboards, bass, and drums, and then the two horns. But the other part that I alluded to before was once we settle on it, do it this way. Do it this way every time. And here's why. When we go out to perform, we'll all have great nights, and there will be nights when we all have a bad night.
Mm.
People screw up. You screw up. If you think about it and you acknowledge it, then you screw up. And then it just starts to fall apart. It really is a very strange, contagious disease when you're playing live. You know it. I mean, you've felt it too.
Sure.
It just spreads, and suddenly it's out of control, and then you start laughing, going, "What's going to happen next?" You know.
So he used really high structure to try to mediate that.
He did, and high structure and repetition. He said, "We need to know this in our sleep, so that on one of those nights when everything's going bad, and we're not going to be able to stretch, and we're not going to be, the communication is broken, because everybody's worried about who's going to make the next mistake. It is really a true thing. You go back to your foundation."
Yeah. It's
And
almost
he literally had a signal. He was like,
huh.
back to rehearsal, back to
Yeah.
square one. And it was just, he had a way of locking things back down to where, okay, this is what we rehearsed, and this is what we knew, and this is what we recorded. This was good enough then. We don't have to be trying to reinvent it or mess around with it or whatever. Lock back in, and it worked. It was a huge lesson about playing live music in front of people, because distractions happen all the time.
Yeah.
And if the music needs you to be stay on the rails, you got to stay on the rails.
I mean, Messina was a devotee of Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours in relation to the practice, the repetition that you described over and over again.
Boy,
which of
was
course creates a kind of muscle memory that you
yeah.
go back to.
I remember one instance now, and for non-musicians, you might get that this would be redoing the simplest thing you've ever done over and over and over again. And how could you keep your head in the game? We had a ballad, and Jimmy was working on all the textures for the ballad, but the rhythm section had to play this ballad. We played this ballad for 4 hours a day, 5 days in a row, 20 hours of.
Wow.
And I'm not kidding. By day three, we're all going, we can't possibly going to do this again. And he walked in and he says, "Yep, we're going to keep
We're going
going."
to do it again. Oh,
We got to the end of that 4 days, and we're playing, and there's moments when you're just, I don't think I can pay attention anymore. And Tony changed the hi-hat pattern. Boom, down tools. Did you just change something? And he walked over to Tony and he sat down in front of Tony on a chair and said, "Play me the groove." And one by one, we all left the room because it was one of those moments that it was, Jim was going to get what he wanted, and he was going to get it the way,
yeah.
and it was like, we had no part in it. And we just kind of bailed for a few minutes to take a breath and came back. And then we moved on, and so on and so forth. But the lesson was, there's got to be a solid foundation, and we'll have fun, and we're all good musicians, and it'll work 99 times out of 100. But on that 100th night, when there's 500 people in front of you, or 1,000 people, or in Little River Band's case, 16,000 people in a venue, trust me, you need to know where square one is.
Yeah.
It was huge. It was a huge lesson.
Well, the other thing that you said to me about the move into Messina's band was how it connected for you to the early Motown work that we did way back in the Sound Investment, because the complexity of the bass lines and singing over those bass lines was sort of a break-in to ultimately the kind of thing that Messina was trying to do as well. Really highly syncopated between drums and bass. And then singing on top of that simultaneously,
Yeah.
even though Jim's singing all these leads. What are you parting in here? Because I assume you and Craig are the ones on top.
Craig had the falsetto, so Craig was the highest harmony. There was another guy that came into the band for a brief moment named Ron Green, who had a very high falsetto as well. Big round woo voice kind of up there. Some of it might have been he or Craig or both of them, but I had the middle tenor part above Jimmy. So I was singing, full voice close to the top of my range, but yet comfortable enough at age 29 that it was,
that I could reach it.
it was doable. Yeah, exactly.
And was that true, Wayne, across the whole album? That both in terms of your playing and singing?
Yeah, Jimmy was very big on different voice, different style, different texture of the song. So there was a lot of interaction, different people singing at different moments for a different amount of cut or smooth, or this blend rings for this song as where the other blend didn't. So he moved people in and out of the vocal blend a lot. It was on stage, it was really fun because you saw people going and coming all the time to get to their mics. It was really good. I remember one trick somewhere in the record that translated later on to the session with George Martin, but we all got together and squatted down on the floor under the grand piano, and we sang our parts into the piano so that the piano strings were ringing on the notes that we were singing. Wow, that rhymes. The piano was ringing on the notes we were singing. But so they weren't miking our voices, they were miking the harp of the grand piano.
Piano. Wow.
For this effect of this long, reverbed, smooth thing with no attack, because we weren't being mic'd. It was the piano that was being mic'd. Really cool, experimental stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was fun.
So following the studio recording, in this particular case, I think you said this was the last night, but was this the first night?
This was the first show. I don't know if it was the first night, but this was the first actual show we did. He was huge in Hawaii. Loggins and Messina were huge in Hawaii because Lahaina, the sailing um, songs, et cetera, et cetera. They were huge over there. So Jimmy decided to debut us by taking us all to Hawaii for 2 weeks. We were in the same place for 2 weeks, two shows a night, staying in the hotel. It was a great way to focus on that as opposed to travel and fatigue and so on and so forth. Um, so this is us in that first live week, um, playing with him at that hotel in on Kauai, and then fast forward to that other picture was the very last night we played together, which was in San Diego, which leads to the next move on. But um, Jim Studer and I were becoming quite good friends, and you can see us both kind of hunched over, looking at each other like, "Here we go into this cool moment." I know what song this is. This is uh, "New and Different Way" because it's the electric 12 string that Jimmy's playing.
Ah,
So very syncopated, very fun. That one he did use a pick on because you had to with the 12 string.
that was
But
the other candidate I looked at actually for what to play from Oasis.
it's good fun. Maybe we'll throw in a link to it later on. Fun record, I'll tell you what, a lot of memories to listen back. But anyway, we got done with this set when I got to the stairwell as we were kind of tearing down our own gear because we didn't have a crew. LRB was their crew were helping us get out of the way, but
Ah,
essentially it was one guy who ran up there. He was Jim's guitar tech, and then he ran up, took it away. I think we had a front of house guy that knew Jimmy's mix and did that. But nevertheless, I grabbed the bass. I was walking out, and I got to the hallway, the stairwell, and oddly enough, there I was of our band. I was the only one that went in that direction, and Graham and Beebe from Little River Band were in that stairwell, and kind of pulled me aside and said, "Look, XYZ, we don't know what your plans are. We don't know what you're doing, and but we're getting ready to record a new album and a world tour next year, and we want to make a change with regard to the bass player, who was he was a studio player that was filling in on the tour. It They wanted to find somebody permanent and somebody that sang, and they had just watched 2 weeks of us do our thing, and they said, are you interested? Do you want to come and work with us?" So move on moment number three for that time period. You heard the music we were making. You heard the music that Sunshower was making on its own, and um, I said, I'm flattered and I'm honored, and you've got an incredible vocal presence and solid band and so on and so forth. But I am very loyal to what's going on here. I have to say no. I don't. I'm not interested. I'm interested, but it's not going to work out. We're going to record our music, then Jimmy's. This is an ongoing thing, and I'm very happy in this band. Very happy where I am.
it's funny the way timing works out when it
Yes.
comes to these things across the course of a life, across the course of a career as well. So you do say, no, I'm not interested at this point in time.
I did.
You're hanging here with Messina and doing extremely well. But in the back of your head, you've got to be thinking a little bit about this little slide I've thrown in from my own work.
I love being part of one of your seminars. Go ahead.
Well, you've already reached in this move on episode the enormity of the possible in your move up. Everything that you described about Santa Monica and what was going on, Santa Barbara, I'm sorry, and what was going on in terms of music just north of LA, what everybody was engaged in doing, the kind of people that you were playing with, the feel that you were engaged in as well, growing musically as you were. As a matter of fact, going back and listening to Oasis, I mean, there's just some really tasty bass work that was done on that album. I wanted to run Do You Want to Dance a Little Longer, because there's this really great run that the whole band does that you just follow right on. So your own playing has really matured into an entirely different kind of level at this point. And the singing, I think in that more comfortable space that you've described yourself. I want to be in the back playing and adding to the singing, but I don't want to have to be up front in doing so. There were a lot of bells that were ringing there as all really, really, if you will, aligned for what it was that you wanted to do. But you got this ask and it's kind of sitting out there and you say no to it. But something else happens really quickly along the way here that turns the tide once again.
Yes. So we're talking late September, just going into October of '79. And on the heels of saying no, that San Diego, there were lots of friends and families of Jim Studers and myself. They were there, so on and so forth. And uh, as that week went on, some people started to become aware of the fact that I had just turned down Little River Band in lieu of staying with this. But everybody got it. It was an interesting reactions from a lot of people. But so we go through October, and hopefully this tour was supposed to be generating interest for the Oasis album, and Columbia was happy, and Jim was happy, and so on and so forth. And that didn't happen. Jimmy didn't. The record didn't catch fire anywhere. New and Different Way was the single. It was Latin pop, and it just didn't hit the mark in 1979. No. So just as we rolled into December, Jimmy announced to everybody that it was all over, and he was cutting us all loose. Which, at the beginning of the Christmas holidays and so on and so forth. And we none of us were getting rich, but we were at least paying our rent, and we had a path, which in any big smoke, that's worth sticking with.
For sure. Didn't want to return to the shopping carts again.
Well, exactly. And I told him, and we started gigging immediately. We're doing 5 nights at wherever we could. And I told everybody, look, I would be crazy if I didn't at least ask. And while we're doing our demos, maybe I can fit in a tour like everybody else in California does. You work with whoever you can, and you come back and you work on your own stuff. And so that was the plan. So I decided, and I told him I'm going to call Little River Band and see what their schedule might be, and could I possibly fit into it. And I called, and somebody answered the phone at the office. I said, Wayne, yeah, it's John Money. He was their tour manager, production manager. I remember you well, so on and so forth. And yeah, we're planning on going back out in April of 1980. And whatever Graham and Beebe said to you, I'm sure is still on the table. But the point is, there will be some more activity, but we're not doing anything until then. We're taking 2 and 3 months off. I'm going to pass this message on, and hopefully when the time comes, they'll call you back. Thanks, John. Let them know I'm willing to be flexible and make it happen if it's still a possibility. Click again. No, we're on landline talking 8,000 miles away with the delay and all that. They're really not going to call back, because they're a country away with great musicians there too. So that was the end of that, and we continued to make our demo and so on and so forth. And as a matter of fact, I blew it in searching the archives. I actually found the note. I found the grocery list.
Oh man, are you kidding?
I'm dead serious. I have it. Where did it go? Dang it! I was going to take a picture of that too, and I forgot to.
This was the note from the call.
So you can see the grocery list is the upper left corner there. Sugar, sauce, juice, and toothpaste. Then I had added wipes and diapers. Because I was, at this point, I'm Mr. Momming during the day and playing with the band at night. So
yeah,
upper left corner, sugar, sauce, juice, toothpaste times 2, wipes and diapers. I scribbled in, because I had to leave, I scribbled in April 14th, Monday, which means that would have been the first day of rehearsal. 2 weeks rehearsal, 2 weeks in Australia, May 20, Italy for TV shows. June and 20 shows in Europe. I think it says June, back on June 20. I would have been back home on June 20. It would have ended. So April to June. And I mean, I cannot believe this. This is on scratch paper next to the phone.
Yeah.
Now, so I had to leave. I wrote this down and then had to leave. No cell phones. Again, you're not communicating like we do now. So, I came home and the wife had seen the message and she said, "Is this for real?" I said, "It's for real. They called." And so 2-3 weeks later, and I will end this episode, which is fitting. I got on the plane to go to Australia for 2 weeks rehearsal and 2 weeks of shows. I mean, I knew I was going to earn something down there, which was, that was amazing to begin with. What a concept. I was going to actually earn money being paid to do this. But we drove to the LAX airport and I got on the plane with 10 cents in my pocket. I had a dime in my pocket. Why I even took the dime, I don't know, but I took the dime with me and headed for Australia.
Yeah. Our listeners wouldn't necessarily know that, depending upon their age, that you used to be able to make a phone call for a dime. So maybe that's why you were carrying the dime in your pocket.
Al, you are absolutely right. I kept the dime because I would have been able to make a phone call from Hawaii if I had to.
Yes. Well, that's the reason that I grabbed this. I grabbed this slide, is to be afraid of the enormity of the possible. Because here we are, 40 years later, celebrating your 40th anniversary with Little River Band, just on the cusp as we move to episode number 5 and the Coda for episode number 5 that takes you squarely into Little River Band, beginning with where you stopped. So I've got one more slide that I wanted to just add for today because I knew that this was an important transition for us as well. This is a photo that's a bit more recent of the two of us, and it has a little history that's attached to it as well. This is Mr. Bertani and Mr. Nelson attending a crosstown classic between the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox.
Now, in terms of world peace, if Cub fans and White Sox fans can sit next to each other and enjoy the moment, doesn't that say something? Doesn't that speak volumes?
How appropriate in the week before the actual election here in 2020, contributing to world peace, or at least U.S. peace on our own, if you will, on our own grounds as well. So.
I'll start with Chicago peace. Come on, I think we would both throw in a pitch to say vote, but of course this will come out way too late. So
yes, we will.
Let's hope everyone did.
But no, we were all thinking and working in different ways to ensure that that actually occurred too. So listen, a good time on this one. I'm glad we were able to spin some music in, which I look forward to in the upcoming Codas, because there's a whole discography now to start to follow with the band that you've contributed to over those years that will take us back and take us to real current time as well as we wrap up our Codas all the way through episode number 10, when we're talking about the 2020s and beyond for that matter. So good to see you, my friend.
Same here. Well done. They're all fun, but this was a good one.